ProjectAD.me has some of the best supplements around. You guys know that I've supported Project AD from the beginning. They've supported Beast Fitness Radio from the beginning. Joe Binley over there has a whole team of just amazing guys. If you go to their website, you can actually check out and see their entire health line, which includes a fiber product, natural greens and reds product, a heart and liver and kidney-based products. We have an actual one of the best glucose disposal agents on the market, if not the best. We have Aminotor, which is essentially essentially a branched amino acid product. We have Nitrox, which is more of a pump-based formula. We have Raging Full, which is going to be your intra-workout carbohydrates, but also can be used in a peri-workout setting. There is things for digestion, there's things for energy, there's things for fat loss. Overall, Project AD has everything you need. Use coupon code BFR25 at checkout to save you guys some money and obviously to support this podcast and support Joe Binley. Mike Arnold has been nice enough to come on Beast Fitness Radio weekly, do Q&As, do topic videos, and so because of that, and because he actually does help sponsor this podcast as well, we want to show him some support. Check out maresearchchems.net, coupon code ALEX15, and masubs.com for code ALEX20. Over at MA Research Chems, those are all HPLC tested peptides, SARMs, all that kind of good stuff. And over at masubs.com, he has more of his specialty-based supplements. Guys, please go support him. You're supporting the show, you're supporting me, you're supporting Mike Arnold. All good guys. Thank you so much. Enjoy the episode.
Disclaimer. I wanted to say right up front that all MA research compounds are for research use only. In vitro use research is the only legal acceptable application. So anything we're going to talk about from this point forward is strictly done for entertainment purposes. There are no recommendations or guidelines given outside the realm of entertainment.
What's up, everyone? Online Prep Coach Alex here with PrepCoach.com, and I am back with another Beast Fitness educational segment. And this episode, podcast, guide, whatever you want to call it, is really focusing on the question of, and answering the question of, why adding load to the bar may not always be the best option. Take this with a grain of salt. Remember, understand and keep this entire podcast and episode and all this information in context. Progressive overload, load to the bar, these all fall under the same category of progression. So if progression is there in some way with a high amount of effort, meaning proximity to failure, and making sure you were getting the most tension out of every possible second you were under tension in the gym, and taking every rep with almost a sadistic level of intent, then you are going to grow. The only reason why I'm even talking about this and bringing this up is because I have a lot of individuals who either follow me or clients of me, friends of mine, whatever, and they have been seeing a lot of recent debates, I guess podcasts, posts, I really don't know. They send them my way. I usually don't even look at them because I just, usually end up talking and I end up teaching them, and that's actually how half of the drawings on the board that I post up are made. I actually draw it out and I send them the picture because it's a little bit easier than trying to type out 14 paragraphs when I can use arrows and all of that kind of fun stuff. So this podcast is not trying to tell you to do anything specific. This is literally just teaching you why you may not always need to add load to the bar. And what I mean by that is because people misinterpret the phrase progressive overload. And they think that it's just about adding load to the bar and getting stronger over time, even though that is not inherently wrong in nature. It's how people interpret it. So if that were the case, and people truly believed, because a lot of people do out there, they truly do believe that, getting stronger over time is the absolutely only way to build muscle tissue. If that was the case, then every bodybuilder with big quads would be squatting 1,000 pounds. How come you don't see that? Why don't you see bodybuilders, benching 700 pounds that have the biggest chests in the world? There's a lot more that comes into the equation, and there's a lot more to that statement. But remember, I'm not saying that progression does not need to be there. Progression definitely does need to be there. So let's take a step back and let's kind of summarize all this from the very basics, from the very biological beginnings, so you guys understand everything, we're on the same page. Literally, we're going back to tendons. So we have tendons that attach muscle to bone. That goes to, and if we look at then the myofibrils, the contractile ability to generate force, we see sarcoplasmic content there, we see enzymes, we see fluids. We move over into the brain, which drives motor nerves, goes to neurological muscular junctions or neuromuscular junctions. We see the actual ability to contract, and then we actually see myosin heads hydrolyzing ATP. Those heads bind to actin, cross bridges rotate, heads bind to ATP, and then cross bridges detach from actin we have that being the very basic aspect of how a contraction essentially happens. Now, if you know, and if you want to know how the very basics of muscle growth occurs, is it's essentially when protein synthesis exceeds breakdown. So essentially when that happens, we see muscle cells adding, or muscles actually adding satellite cells. And we do know that satellite cells increase cell nuclei in muscle cells. Obviously they are multinucleated. If you look at that, that essentially enhances and stabilizes the capacity of muscle to just add more protein. We see that muscle tension and available amino acid pools actually trigger muscle growth extremely well. And if you really look at the research, if you have a high level of amino acids, regardless of tension, they can stimulate protein synthesis without tension. We look at different hormonal environments, different chemical signaling. Those all can stimulate muscle protein synthesis without tension. So if you are the individual who only takes the big keywords like mechanical tension and says, I've never seen anything in the literature that says you can grow without mechanical tension, you're obviously not well read. Again, not trying to be a dick or call anyone out. That's the conversation I have with myself in my own head. But essentially, the longer we can keep a given muscle under tension, the more it's essentially going to grow. Like I said, remember the chemical and hormonal environment and how important it is for growth. Look at androgens, growth hormone, insulin, all of those other endogenous hormones, or if you exogenously apply them, can and will stimulate muscle protein synthesis regardless of tension. When you go under that aspect and you look at myonuclear domain, you look at gene expression, you look at changes in action potentials in nerves, you look at insulin sensitivity, prolactin stimulation, the entire leptin ghrelin aspect, creatine synthase, ribosomal activity, mitochondrial adaptations, ion channels. You look at all those different pathways, ERK, TSC2, PI3K, AKT. You look at phosphate splitting. You look at glycogen fluxing. You look at IL-6. You look at inflammatory factors. You look at IGF and growth hormone, that actual access. You look at water transport channels. You look at estrogen values. All of these are ways that you can actually build muscle tissue, and you can elicit some kind of change on a chemical, structural, or some kind of level. So if we understand that, if we understand also that the bending, breaking, bridging aspect of contraction is very big to all of this, and we see changes with ATP pools, we see mitochondrial modulations, that leads to, and if you look at this just from a training aspect, you see those changes in contractile protein interactions, which then changes structural metabolic protein, depending on which actual literature you're looking at, which precedes which, and that leads to nuclear regulation. You have those interactions, like I mentioned before, with inflammatory aspects. You have fluid content. I already mentioned the different substrate fluctuations like glycogen. All of these things have an impact on the amalgam that is hypertrophy. So hypertrophy is composed of tons of different variables, and you can stimulate muscle protein synthesis, mTOR, and other anabolic-based pathways through multiple different means, whether they be chemical, hormonal, environmental. The list literally goes on and on. So if we understand that, if that is our basis understanding, and you understand that there is not just one way to build muscle tissue, and that you can actually stimulate muscle protein synthesis without tension, now we need to move into the aspect of different things that actually influence strength beyond just your muscular size. And this is where a lot of people run into the issue of just focusing on adding load to the bar. Actually, before I even get into this, I'm going to say, usually people who just focus on adding load to the bar, they do it at all means or any means necessary. So form starts to break down, tension starts to leave, and all of a sudden they're benching 405, and yet they're getting big triceps and their pecs are not growing at all. Their pecs are regressing. You look at people doing overhead presses with, 315, 405, whatever crazy amounts, and why aren't their shoulders that big? This goes back to tension. Where are you placing that tension? This goes back to effort. Where are you putting all of that effort? Is it focused on the muscle that you're actually trying to go? Hypertrophy and strength are two completely different things. So this leads us to all of these other factors that can get you stronger in the gym, but then you don't get any bigger, okay? And that is anthropometry, that stretch shortening cycles, muscle stiffness, rate coding, your ability to tolerate pain, so pain thresholds, neurological intermediates of excitement, motivation. We have muscular coordination, motor unit activation and synchronization, the actual ability for a single fiber to contract specifically in regards to tension. We have connective tissue, we have voluntary action, we have the actual base muscle architecture. I've actually had some interesting conversations with some individuals that are very high up in the muscle architecture field, and you start asking them these kind of questions, and they start really blowing your mind. But regardless, then you have blank tension relationships, agonist and synergistic versus antagonist, moment arms, technique. The list can literally go on and on. So if we look at all of that, you can understand why biological variability matters. Those are the people. There's some people out there that put on a ton of size and no strength, or very little strength. And then the opposite. Some people get extremely strong, but don't put on many size. If you really look in the literature and you actually account for normalized muscle force, so just essentially how strong a muscle is relative to how large that individual is, it can increase up to 40 or 50% for certain people, and then literally decrease up to like, I think 5 or 10%. Those numbers could be slightly off, but if you have some people that can increase this number and other people that can actually lower this number and regress, that should probably tell you something. So not only that, but training style obviously has a massive determinant of what are you gaining, strength or size. And that's just that you should train based on your given goal. So if you are a bodybuilder, you probably should spend more time training like a bodybuilder than you should like a powerlifter, and vice versa. If you're a powerlifter or a strongman, you should probably focus on what your sport is and the demands of your sport than the other aspects. That's not to say, because remember, I made this specific post for, I'm making this specific podcast rather, for hypertrophy, but all these things can account for all the differences that you see out there in sports. Why some people are faster than others, why some people are stronger than others, why some people walk around with 6% body fat and other people struggle to get under 15% body fat. So this episode is not trying to say that, oh, this training protocol is the only way to grow, or you gotta train with high intensity, or you gotta train with high volume, or whatever. Those are all the variables that you fill in after you understand these basics. Now that you understand these basics and you realize that hypertrophy is an amalgam of variables, and that hypertrophy can be accomplished through so many different ways. I mean, if you just look at mTOR and stimulating muscle protein synthesis and looking at different ways in anabolic signaling, for an example, you really start to go, oh, wow, I can actually stimulate growth through, 12, 20 different pathways right there. And then we look at this aspect and that aspect, and literally the conversation just keeps snowballing. So I don't want to belabor on this topic. I really wanted this to just get it out to you guys so that you guys understand things like ribosomes, like mitochondrial adaptations, neurological interventions, inflammatory interventions, insulin sensitivity. All of these little things matter because all of these things can have their own independent effect on hypertrophy. So now that we know that, go back to your drawing board, figure out what volume, frequency, intensity of training protocol you need. And as long as you are actually making sure that the effort is there, again, taking things to or within a certain range of failure and making sure that every second you are under tension, you are keeping that tension on the muscle that you are trying to grow, that is going to be the best bang for your buck. And remember, this applies for enhanced and natural individuals. If you do go down the enhanced side, you can see that androgens enhance force production. You see it changes differences with energy systems. You see substrate utilization being obviously enhanced and altered. We see myogenic regulatory factors being changed. So with growth hormone and the nuclear interactions that are going on there. We see fiber type transformations clear across the board between both. We have the endogenous production of all these hormones on the natural side. So there are a lot of things to take into account, but overall, this should give you the basic understanding, the basic biological understanding of, oh, that's how you build muscle. That's why people are building muscle tissue during this quarantine, for example, when they can't focus on load on the bar. It's because there are tons of other pathways that you can actually stimulate to grow, to drive anabolism. So as always, thank you guys so much for listening. Check out thepepcoach.com. I'll see you guys next time.